a lot of companies are kind of in a tough position right now. Like they're going to have to justify their valuation, I think, in the next year.
And I think there's going to be at least one open source lab reach parity with one of the US providers. And then I think all hell is going to break loose.
Yeah.
Speaking patterns break the code, pre-trained pipe.
Yeah. Should we talk about next year? I mean, I think we're already doing it almost, right?
Yeah. You think AGI 2026?
2026 is definitely not AGI. 2026 is GPT-6, I think. I think GPT-6 is going to come out next year. And if it doesn't, I think OpenAI is kind of screwed. I think OpenAI is in this weird existential sort of like risk position right now where, they're valued at $500 billion. Their revenue is like 5 or something like that. Like it's a fraction of that. They're spending so much money. I think that OpenAI has really backed itself into a corner where it's its own little bubble. It has to start producing something that is exponentially better than what OSS models can give you. And it has to find new ways of making money. So GPT-6 is coming out next year, I believe. And they're really going to lean into the shopping stuff that they're starting to do. They're going to lean into ads. They're going to try to basically make every single one of their paying customers start paying them 3 or 4-fold, whatever they're currently paying. And like the free customers are also somehow, they're going to be able to extract value from that in some way, Otherwise, I just don't see how they could be viable. Like the valuation is just bananas, like $500 billion. By that same metric, I would say that a lot of companies are kind of in a tough position right now. Like they're going to have to justify their valuation, I think, in the next year.
Insofar as the market actually has gravity, which I've been a long believer of, and I've been wrong on that bet for I feel like the last decade running. Gravity has not been found for some of these companies. But
Right.
I think in the GPT-6 case, I know that there will be a GPT-6 that's coming out next year. I think that the devil is in the details of exactly where they end up pushing the metrics and on what kind of tasks. And there I actually am very curious, where I feel like some of these companies that are coming out right now, like Ilia's, they're focused on very niche industrial applications for AI, of being able to say, like, our strategic bet, for instance, is to own law or to own finance or to own something else. And maybe even own some verticals in that. Like I could see someone just going after the PE market and saying, we actually are not going to care about other types of finance or equity. It's just PE. We're going to be the best PE model. And that kind of ties in with the RL environments question too, because the amount of time that you spend curating these environments seems to, at least right now, have a direct proxy to how well do you end up doing on those tasks. But there's human skill and effort into curating these environments, dedicating compute to that versus doing something else. And where all of these companies have really found product market fit thus far has been in coding. But in some ways, that's kind of a cached vertical with regards to differentiation. Like I think it's
Yeah.
very hard at this point in time to develop a coding model that is so significantly better than your competition that you will rule the roost for 6 months to a year just based on that. It's this very incremental gain where sometimes Codex is edging out against Claude
The
Code and then
competition's real full.
Gemini.
Yeah.
Yes, it's hard. So I think my notion of where OpenAI is really going to be able to capture some legitimate margin next year for the next few years is if they are able to double down on this consumer expectation that OpenAI is where you find AI and every other company is not, then I think that they will have some staying power there. And I think that Google, for the most part, has been able to keep its moat because it has a lot of properties, but mostly because it's still where people go to search things online. Like Instagram has been able to keep its staying power because people go there to see what their friends are doing.
That's true.
And I think that consumers usually can hold basically one thing about a company in their minds at one time about what that company does. And I think people that are really in the industry can understand all these nuances and different product lines and whatever. But I think for the most part, people are like, Apple is the iPhone and MacBook company. Google is the search company. Facebook is the social network timeline company. And OpenAI is the AI company. Like that is the
And
chatbot
like
company.
OpenAI is the only one that humans will really, or the normal consumers really know of.
Yeah, I think there's a really heavy lift for Google to fully reinvent itself as an AI company because people already associate it with search. And it's very easy to get consumers to associate something with you when you're a new company and you're just starting out from scratch because you're building that whole brand identity from zero. I think if you already are the incumbent, there's some amount of incumbency risk that you just have, even if you have the best product, but people just don't really think of you as being able to fulfill that need for that kind of a product.
I think the concern is that if AI is everywhere, then OpenAI kind of becomes a little redundant. Like if when you Google something, you just see AI results, and when you take a picture on your iPhone, you just see, AI searches popping up. At that point, it's like, well, why would I go on OpenAI, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything else is doing what OpenAI does, so why do I need this third thing? And then you kind of cancel your subscription. I think that's the existential risk for OpenAI. And I think they need to reinvent themselves as more of a search company, as like the company that does really personalized good search for you that Google can't do. But that's going to be a tough bet because Gemini 3 is so good, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if they can do it. I mean, I think they're going to have to start taking ads somehow, They're going to have to copy Google in some ways. But
Yeah, I think ads are definitely going to be the answer. I think doubling back honestly on research is probably one answer too. Like I feel like
Yeah.
for a while, all of these big labs have kind of focused their internal efforts a little bit more on productionalization than they have on like really deep research. And that makes sense. Like the scaling laws have largely been working. It's been much more of an engineering question in order to just scale these clusters and try to do things with the next order of volume of data.
yeah.
But I do imagine some of the answer, if you really want to outperform, is taking a step back so you can take 2 steps forward or 10 steps forward and say, we're going to now start prototyping smaller, maybe, 7 to 20 billion parameter models that use some really deep new mathematical insight and see if those can scale as well. And then maybe outperform in the long tail versus just throwing, 30 more petaflops of capacity at these models during train time.
Yeah, totally. We were talking about this too with DeepSeek. I think smaller models are going to be interesting. Distilled models are going to be interesting. Models in that like sweet spot range of 7 to 30 billion are going to become really popular. I think just scaling the pre-training data is always going to be something that's going to be interesting. But frankly, I think the more interesting thing is going to be in terms of training paradigms, architectural decisions, right? Like the type of data you feed your model, all these things are going to be more interesting. And companies are going to start doubling down on that, releasing smaller, more distilled models that are cheaper, easier to serve, faster. So I think that all kind of goes in the same bucket for me. But yeah, I think GPT is in a tough place. I think Meta is kind of cooked as well, dude, in a big way.
Mm.
We'll see. I mean, I feel like their stock price could plummet to, whatever. They're currently like 600 something, like maybe half. I think MSL was kind of a big bad bet for them. It seems like the company is a little bit in disarray. And I mean, I can tell you honestly, it feels like their internal structure when you're looking at Meta jobs is such a disaster because they have 6 different research orgs, structured across 5 different divisions of the company. It just feels like the vision that was set by Jan was fairly clear. Now that it's mostly just Alex Wang, and to a certain extent, I don't know how much Mark has to say about the vision of this AI strategy, but it feels a little less clear, like what their bet is here. Are they
Yeah.
still an open source company? Or are they going to focus more on like the Llama style stuff? Are they going to do more of like the data stuff that Alex is so interested in, right?
Literally, I don't actually even know really what the goal
Like, what are
of
they
the
working on?
organization
Yeah, I don't know.
is. There are probably a few different things, but even naming it the Super Intelligence Lab would lead me to believe that they're going to increasingly back these like really, really crazy moonshots. And it's going to be like an internal X incubator. X, the Alphabet subsidiary, the like
not
Google
X.
partner. Yeah,
Yeah.
not X.AI.
Right.
So I don't know though. I don't know if they've been particularly public about that, which means one of a host of different things. It could mean one that they're actually championing that in the background, and they'll say, we'll have some advancements to share in 3 years' time, when we finally crack the code on doing super intelligence. Or, that means that they're in disarray, or that means that they're focused on productionalizing these things. But I think it's easy to get pretty dubious when companies just aren't really announcing what they're focused on, or the focus that they did announce, i.e., on the super intelligence thing. There's just not a whole lot of follow up. It's a little bit like when Apple pre-announced Apple Intelligence is like this amazing thing that was going to be bundled in everything, and then they just didn't manage to launch it. It like they
It's
kind of
tough
got
luck.
ahead of
Yeah.
their skis,
Yeah.
and I think announced something that they weren't really ready for.
Yeah.
So I think you always kind of are fearful that that's happening behind the scenes when you don't see the follow through and like
Yeah.
continuous update on where you're going. Yeah, so I think we'll see. I think
We'll
that's
have
true
to
for all the
see.
big labs. I mean, you mentioned Meta. I think Apple, it feels like at this point, has kind of given up on the software AI race. They're doubling down on the hardware AI race to just build increasingly powerful things on the edge that people can then use
I
on their
don't know, man.
devices.
I kind of feel like Apple is gonna come out swinging in like a year or two. They have pretty good scientists. You know, the research that they're doing is pretty solid. They have a continuous narrative to the research that they do, and it all the research papers I've read from Apple tend to be very, you know, mathematical, rigorous, theoretical, with interesting implementations. I don't know why they haven't been able to train their own transformer. It doesn't seem that hard, you know?
Well, especially when you think, DeepSeek did it with a team of 30
Yeah,
people
I don't
in half a
understand.
year. Apple has trillions of dollars. I think I just deeply don't know. Other
Mhm.
than I think with all the big companies, there is so much corporate dysfunction and bureaucracy. And I think the philosophy that you have to have when you do ML research is you do need to break things. And these models are going to be statistic and it might be embarrassing for some of the answers that they give back and whatever, a host of different things. You need a much higher risk tolerance to actually roll these out in public, which is probably why of the big labs, Fair was the earliest to this ball game, in addition to maybe Google,
Mhm.
but they certainly were pushing models out on a pretty regular clip in a way that Google was still keeping things internal. I think just because the ethos of the company is let's move fast and break things, brother. And let the
Yeah,
pieces fall where they
yeah.
may. I think when you're dealing with people on social networks, and there are a lot of other negative implications potentially for that kind of philosophy.
Yeah,
But
no, I hear you.
I mean, that's why Google took so long to really turn things around. Like they had the best researchers, they had the most compute, they had the most data, and it still took them years to actually get ahead of the 8 ball on this. So I don't know. I think part of it is just like organizational morass. Now, whether that means that once you get the org pointed in the right direction, you can go full steam ahead, boom supersonic speed, unclear. But I
What are
think
they even
it's
trying to do though, dog? I mean,
Apple. What's
yeah,
Apple
like,
trying to do?
are they trying to train like a trillion parameter model? I don't think so. I mean, I think for them, it makes a lot of sense to really lean into the hardware component of it at the very level of, give a model like kernel access to your computer, train a model that can like really live on device in some clever way or like on the edge. I think like there's just they have this unique opportunity, which is the fact that they own the hardware that this is going to be running on. They own the accelerator chips.
They own the customer relationship.
They own the customer relationship. I mean, they own this like walled garden of all these different devices talking to each other. It's almost like they have such a good starting point that it's unclear what to do. And it almost seems like the wrong choice is to just train another trillion parameter model on and serve it on a cluster, you know? You could do that, but there's like this interesting opportunity that is so ripe with possibility that no one else has. It feels like they're almost like tripping over their feet here, trying to do something cool and just not really figuring out like what to do, you know? I don't even know if it's a question of pointing the org in the right direction of just training a model. I think it's almost like deciding at the upper level of the company what kind of AI stuff do we want to do? Maybe they're the ones that come out with this new concept of a kernel level language model, like a language model that lives at the level of the OS, can do cool things for you, can create brand new applications on the fly dynamically for you, can store your entire context window as you're interacting with your device in memory in some cool way. There's all this cool stuff you could do, right? Maybe they're trying to do that. Maybe it's just really hard to get right. I don't know, man.
Yeah. I mean, I think we won't know until they announce it.
Yeah.
I do think Apple's ethos has always been we're a software company that feels like we have to build the best hardware in order to fulfill the dream of our software. Like I think in their heart that's really what Apple has always been. And that's what you see with a whole M chip. I mean, they made their own architecture apparently because back in 2012 or something, maybe 2010, Steve Jobs had a meeting with the top execs, top brass of the MacBook team, and he opened up the computer. It was on Intel. It took maybe like a minute and a half to boot up. He said, "I want this." And then he brought out an iPad, turned it on, and it turned on in 5 seconds. He said, "I want this to do this." Like I
Mhm,
want the
mhm.
MacBook to be an iPad,
Right.
basically. And the team was like, "All right, guess we have to now develop our own silicon." And then they
Yeah.
did. They used actually the base architecture of their mobile chipsets that they designed for the iPhone and iPads to bring to the MacBook. And it's been wildly successful. Like best thing that Apple has done in the last decade, as far as I'm concerned, is build their own chipsets for Macs. I mean, these things are blazing. I don't know. Like by that ethos, in my mind, it would be such a missed opportunity to not couple really good software that's based on some ML primitive with the good hardware for doing ML stuff that they already have. I think there's an element of it. It's the power of LLMs are that you can ask them anything,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not a particularly exciting customer feature that you can really bake into Apple's design system and language to make it something that's opinionated. It's almost like the power of LLMs is that they're unopinionated. And I think Apple is a very opinionated company that wants to look for things that they can put into a demo that's not just the raw brute force intelligence of some model, but it's something else. And I think across the whole ecosystem, we don't really have a good answer for exactly what that something is, aside from, efficiency or AI agents that can actually help you do something. But they're like productivity tools. And I don't know if Apple ever has really been that interested in shipping a productivity stack.
Yeah, I
We'll
could
see.
see them doing ultimate personalization is something that I think we're going to see this year. And we've started seeing it a little bit from companies like Anthropic. If you've used Claude recently, it's doing this really cool thing where it's like citing your past history and using context from other projects even when it responds to you, so it'll be like, oh, like I know that you're doing this. Is this why you're doing this? Right. Imagine if Apple, because they have access to everything you've ever done on your computer, right? If that's all in its context in some clever way, cached, whenever you open up any application, right? Any application on your Mac, it could have perfect context about you and use that to effectively inform any of your user experiences with your devices, right? That's kind of the holy grail of using your device. Like at that point, your device really becomes a reflection of you. Like it is your iPhone then, right? It is your Mac in a way that it isn't. If I were to use your Mac, it would almost be a weird experience for me because your Mac has your context in it, right? So whenever you're writing something or taking a picture, like it can condition that, it's the user interaction on you. This is your device. So that is something I could see them doing and leaning into, and that would feel very Apple-like to me. But how you do that is very tricky, I think. But we'll see. And speaking of, coming to my next point that I had prepared here is the fact that full-scale Apple development, to me, feels like it's gonna be a modular unit of computation. Like, already
Mm.
these models can basically zero shot a full application for you just in one go, right? And so at that point, it feels like, well, developing a program, developing an application, that is one unit of computation that these models can do in one go. You could then that kind of opens the door to a lot of things, right? Like, now if you are using an agent that needs to create, has to solve some problem it's never seen before, and there is no tool to do so, it can just create an application on the fly for you, right? That's something I think is going to be very much in our future. Like some application that it'll just generate on the fly to do a brand new task for you. Say it needs to do some really fancy OCR on some sort of like data set that it's never seen before, I could see this model like on the fly creating an application that is really good at OCR, right? In some clever way.
Are you
Like,
finally going to build your WB competitor?
yeah, exactly. That would be really cool too, right? Like a model that can like analyze data for you on the fly. And so it does that by creating another program that like, spawns off a bunch of like sub processes to analyze and crunch the data in some clever way. I don't know, right? But using a program, like creating a full on application as just one unit of computation, I think is definitely in our future, like in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with that. I think the models are already pretty good at doing that, especially when you instruct them or like put the right kind of tooling parameters on top of it. Like, I think this was a year where a lot of people started playing with Lovable and Replit for themselves and saying, I have some side project. I've seen so many non-technical people that I know
Yeah,
spinning up something
totally.
on these platforms, and they all have a pretty similar like purple gradient to them. You can definitely
Mhm.
tell that they've been vibe coded, but I think to a first order approximation, number one, that's obviously gonna get better because the models get better. It'll get better at design. Probably become less obvious that things are vibe coded. But even if they do appear obviously vibe coded, if you're only using them yourself or with a small cohort of people, I know someone who made an app for their Dungeons and Dragons little
Mhm.
group that they play with. The group knows that it's vibe coded, but it's useful so people don't actually care because it's
Totally.
so tailored to them.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably going to be a story of the next year in companies as well, where for a long time there's kind of been this balance of, well, do you build something or do you buy something? That's the conventional IT question that they ask you. When you're trying to procure some new software, they're like, can we buy it? What's the cost? And can we build it? And what's the cost of building it going to be? And there's some threshold at which you want to do one versus the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think companies that are like really opinionated about what they need, they have some workflow that they feel like is not on the open market. Historically, the alternative of building it has been hundreds of thousands of dollars because you need to pay some internal eng team or some consultancy to build that thing for you, to maintain it over time. There are a ton of like wrong turning costs. If you could just build exactly what your company wants for $1,000 and just have that be this incredibly specialized, exactly purpose built to you and to what you want, I think a lot of companies are going to find that appealing. I will say, I find that companies are often very bad at knowing what they want, and non-software people speccing out some solution are usually pretty bad at speccing out the right kind of software for what they want. So I'll be curious whether or not ML models are able to close some of that chasm of being able to take some business requirements, push back on the right kind of things to actually end up with better software that
Mm-hmm.
might be equally personalized to their company, but is just done in a better way than I think taking the naive business requirements and then translating that into some software.
I think that's true. I think what I'm saying is even a little different from that in the sense that, why is it the case that when I visit Amazon.com, I basically see the same website as you do, right? It's because it's been like coded by, design team and like programmers coded this up, right? Sure. So we basically see the same thing, slightly different personalized search results, right? But does that have to be the case? Like at some level, if these models are getting so good, whenever I visit Amazon.com, you could almost imagine that given my specific search interaction history with this app, they could just create a whole new version of the application on the fly for me by prompting an LLM, right? I mean, right now this sounds kind of ridiculous, but what's stopping that future from happening? Like if Amazon sees that, okay, well, I'm only using it to buy whatever. I'm buying it like plants. I love plants. Okay, so I'm just buying a bunch of like plant stuff and whatever. Well, like at that point, if that's the case, then why not just code up a little part of the website that they serve me
Yeah.
that is just purely like a plant selling website, right? It's not crazy, and that would be a better user experience for me. So I guess to a certain extent, I'm saying that yes, like companies will use this to create applications internally for them to help them out, but also like the whole design paradigm of how we interact with computation, I think is going to totally change. Like building applications on the fly for someone is going to be a reality that is going to happen in the next 2 years, right? I don't think it's that crazy for the internet as a whole to just change fundamentally. That's like UX design, because if you're just building websites on the order of 15 seconds, like each user could have their own experience of a website. What's stopping
Yeah.
that from being the case?
Yeah. The loading bar on the website is literally loading the tokens that are outputted to render you
To render you
HTML.
your website. Exactly.
Someone did this experiment a few months ago where every button that you click on some fake HTML page just sends a round trip prediction request to actually get you new HTML contents that then serializes the next page. So it's almost navigating this invented site that's completely dynamic on the fly. I don't think that's likely to happen. But I think it's interesting because there's a tension in what you're saying, which is these companies obviously want personalization to happen on a per user basis. But there are also so many design decisions that are made at big companies are based on big scale data of just
Yeah.
A B testing infinite combinations. And the only way that they can do that is because of the consistency of the site. Like the only way that an A B test can succeed is where if I'm in the A cohort and you're in the B cohort. Whereas in
Yeah.
reality, there are thousands of different cohorts that are all cooperating at the same time. So yeah, I'll be curious which one wins out. Like if LLMs can get good enough at one-shot performance and at your past history on the site to be able to say specifically for Richard's history, if we're feeding this into an LLM, instead of tokens, they would be almost action vectors of what have you done on this site historically. If it's good enough at predicting the next thing that you're going to do, like given some page that it shows it, maybe you actually don't even need A/B tests anymore. But I do suspect that like in company culture, when thinking about something like this, there is like such an institutional bias to testing every single thing and to
100%.
keeping up
Yeah.
like some quality bar of consistency and brand identity and whatnot, that this might be kind of a stretch for the existing incumbents to do. I wonder if some smaller shops are going to be the first ones to crack the code on this and just eat the lunch of some of the incumbents.
Yeah,
Like
that'd be
a
really
shopping
interesting.
store
Yeah.
that's just the products that you want at all times, maybe fulfilled with some combination of, LLMs doing some prediction, maybe it's conventional recommendation engine stuff, but, you know, finding exactly what you want from the open web, even if you don't necessarily have that product indexed, seems like a company that's going to exist in the next year.
I mean, it could even be like A/B testing on you on the fly. You know what I mean? Like it could be like, oh, interesting that Pierce hasn't clicked on the buy now button. Let me, re-render it to be here now. Does that work? Does this work? Right? And just create a new experience for you on the fly. I think like the reality that we live in is going to change in some ways fundamentally. Like where things have felt pretty formatted and prescriptive in the past, I think LLMs allow us to be very dynamic in our perceptions of reality, right? What is real is already starting to change a little bit because you can just kind of create a video, like a new version of reality on the fly. We have like virtual worlds now where you can enter, right? And it's generating something for you on the fly. What's stopping it from just generating your experience browsing the internet for you on the fly? I think that's kind of the next thing, and I think companies are going to start leaning more into that. It sounds a little abstract now, and I'm sure the implementation of this is going to be different than I'm describing, but I think the feeling, this like overall like the ethos of what I'm saying, I think is going to be true in the next couple of years.
I think especially as you get inference speeds faster, like
Yeah, totally.
Cerebras or like other chipsets that can do many thousands of tokens per second. That starts getting you in the latency regime of probably just loading a website on a slow connection, which
Sure.
people are obviously
Yeah.
willing to do given some parameters. Okay, well, one of my bets for next year, Richard, is I think open source is going to continue its march of progress. And I think there's going to be at least one open source lab, probably some of the existing ones like Mistral, DeepSeek, and the Kimi, what's it called? Moonbeam?
Mooncake, yeah,
Moonshine?
or whatever.
and
yeah.
the Mooncake guys are going to reach parity with one of the US providers. So specifically, one of those open source companies are going to reach parity with one of the US AI open source closed providers. And then I think all hell is going to break loose.
Yeah, that's going to be cool. I think you're right. I think you're probably right.
Now, the question in my mind is why are these companies doing this? Because there's a pretty clear profit incentive with the US frontier labs of they have the best model or they have one of the best models they can sell into companies, but they're basically selling inference right now. Like their way to recoup the investment that they get during training and some of the salary costs of all the researchers that are doing this is by billing for inference. The thing about open source is even if they're not telling you all the nitty-gritty details of how did they train this thing and they're keeping some IP, they're giving you the weights. I mean, they're giving you the end product that ostensibly you can just run yourself or run on third-party clouds that you don't control and you get no money off of. So I do wonder some dynamic of, are these companies going to continue to open source their products? Is this their way of getting name recognition and ID and then transferring into closed source models? The only justification that I could possibly have is if they're being subsidized by some government initiative or by some like long-term horizon bet that says, we want to really have the best OpenAI and we think these weights should be free. Like we don't think that there's an international incentive or like a domestic incentive for there to be weights that are in closed labs. They need to spread out and maybe undercut some US competition. I don't know, but I think that that's also going to reach ahead in 2026. We'll have a better sense for what is the end game of these labs that keep releasing these really good and pretty expensive open source architectures. Is it state level competition? Is it like just industrial competition? Is it talent competition? What is it? Why?
Yeah, we really don't know. We have no idea. Like what is motivating DeepSeek? I don't really know. What's motivating Kimi? I have no real idea. I think it's just VC investments right now. Remember when Uber was super cheap? When it would cost like $10 to get from like Palo Alto to SF? And we were
VC
like,
fund my life, baby.
yeah, we were like, this is crazy, but okay, cool, And now it makes sense, right? Now, like all of a sudden these things are costing more. I think it's gonna happen. It's the same thing basically. There's gonna be some pressure point at which point these companies have to start making money. And then we'll actually see the real cards revealed.
Maybe, maybe not though, right? Because I feel like the theme of the last like 5 years in the EV and the battery market has been that it's just government, like state level subsidies that allow manufacturers to keep doing things and selling them below cost internationally. They did that for solar. I think they did that for like batteries and EVs as well. So I don't know. I'm interested to see if like you can follow the same kind of conventional economic manufacturing playbook that has worked so well for China, especially with international exports, Like they just surpassed $1 trillion worth of trade surplus internationally. If that maybe is also what they're thinking for AI models too, the way to get the world to adopt Chinese AI models instead of US AI models and then build the ecosystems around that is just to release everything for free continuously. It
I don't
sounds
know, man.
outlandish.
I mean, Chinese companies tend to really be winner take all, right? Like they like to have everything in one. Like
Yeah.
fundamentally, like all apps do the same thing because everyone's competing for everything, right? I wonder if that's also going to be the play here for AI
Mhm.
companies in China, where it's like you need to have the best open source model because everyone else has good open source models. So if you want to
Mhm.
be the best AI company, you have to dominate the biggest models. You have to be the best small model provider. You have to be the best open source model provider. You have to have the fastest inference. You have to have, the most reliable compute cluster. You have to have your own compute cluster.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
I mean, we'll have to see, right? There's a world in which DeepSeek ends up eating Kimmy's lunch, and it's just DeepSeek becomes the Chinese government's like state-backed proxy AI company. I could see that also happening. I mean, who
Or
knows, man?
Baidu steps in and just undercuts both of them. I mean,
Who
you
knows,
really don't
man?
often hear about obviously like Alibaba and Baidu are publishing research. They're like
Yeah.
releasing some models and papers, but it does kind of feel like in the LLM conversation, Kimmy and DeepSeek are kind of just by themselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's Quen, right? People like Quen a lot.
That's true. Yeah, fine tuning especially.
Baidu's kind of been a little bit lagging recently. Yeah, who knows, man? China's an interesting player here because in some sense the state can always just say, no, you guys are done, right?
That's true too.
And just fire or like take over the company fundamentally. So who knows, man? I mean, it's a brave new world out there. We'll really have to see how it pans out. But I'm excited, dude. I think next year is gonna be pretty cracked. I think that there are less unknowns than there were last year around this time for what
Mm.
next year would have in store. Like we've seen, I think 2025 was like increasing gains across the board for a lot of things. And if we keep seeing that, I think 2026 is going to be a pretty exciting year. The big question for me is going to be around this like AI bubble thing. What's going to happen? Are we going to start seeing cracks? Are we not going to start seeing cracks? TBD, man.
If you had to put a bet on it, one way or another, what do you think?
I think the party keeps going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think the party keeps going for one more year because no one wants the party to end.
we're
Everyone's
on
having a
our
good
seventh
time.
beer. It's 2 a.m. But
It's a rush. I mean, I think we need to start seeing these like really big plays pan out. I think robotics, if that starts panning out, then the party's definitely going to keep going on. If there ends up being like a good ad-based model for AI companies to make money, that's going to be something that's going to let the party to keep, cranking on. Yeah, I don't really know how we could see that at the level of AI models getting better because they are already beating all these benchmarks. So I don't think there's a play here to say, hey, well, the party will keep going on if models just keep beating more benchmarks. They're already so good. So I don't think that's the right direction, but there's these sort of like orthogonal ways that models could develop and AI companies could tap into, profitability that could be interesting, but very much still TBD.
yeah, I mean, we'll see, man.
What
These
what do
things are
you
so
think
cheap right now.
if you had to make a bet, what would you say?
I'm going to take a guess that I think more company budgets are going to be allocated to AI products in the new year. Because right now we're getting these things for an absolute steal. I mean, realistically, right? If you pay $200 for a Claude or Codex subscription per month, you're getting an unbelievable amount of value that probably would have had to pay some external engineer
Yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month just to do that one thing. And companies have that budget. I don't think companies want to pay that much, but even an order of magnitude more than it is today, going from $200 to $2,000, I think most companies would
100%.
probably accept if that meant an increase in productivity for some of their employees. So I think more corporate budgets are probably going to be allocated. I don't know if that will really make a dent in this overall "are we in a bubble" question because we're just in such a dearth with a valuation revenue gap.
Mhm.
I don't know how long that's going to keep going, but I feel like every time that I've seen a bubble in our lifetimes, I thought the bubble would burst maybe 2 years before it did, or like 3 years. So if my historical parallels are anything to go by, I think we're headed towards a crash in like 2029, but not anywhere
Not
before.
anytime
I'm being a
soon.
little
All right,
tongue in
well, it's
cheek.
good
I
to
have
know,
no
man.
idea.
I
I
don't
think it
know.
could certainly happen before, but I do think the party there's still more juice in the party. I think people are still excited.
I
As long as
agree.
there's
Yeah.
hype around it and like
Yeah.
more consumers continue to adopt it, I think the party's gonna probably keep going.
Well, dude, that's an optimistic note to end on.
Is it? Maybe.
For next year, for
We
2026.
we like the party. I feel like knowing that you're headed off a cliff at some point is probably not the
Well, but we
best.
just don't know the future, man. You know, it's so hard to predict these things. And the fact that we're talking about it now, I think, is already a fairly good sign.
You mean because we're getting ahead of it, basically?
Well, in some sense, bubbles burst when everyone simultaneously has the same realization, right? When there's a lack of confidence.
Yeah.
I think if there's a gradual sort of like hesitancy and apprehension, I think bubbles tend to burst a little less aggressively.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good. There's also, I mean, yeah, there's 1,000 state level things that can be done to like temper, the impact as well. Everyone thought the Chinese real estate bubble was going to be a huge problem. Seems like it isn't really. You can let air out of bubbles slowly if you know they're happening and you put the right safeguards in place. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, man, we'll see what 2026 has in store. But you know what I know for sure 2026 is going to have in store? Us being neighbors.
That's right, dude. I knew you were going to say that. Yes, sir.
Which is probably what I'm most looking forward to in the new year.
I'm stoked, dude. It's going to be so fun. It's going to be so fun to do our first recorded in-person session, probably like sometime late January, early February.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. 1.5 months from now, February 1st, our first in-person pod, dude.
Wow, incredible!
I'm stoked. It's gonna be so soon.
That's gonna be such a blast. I'll tidy up the apartment. We'll get ready for you.
Well, before then, man, I hope you have a great Christmas. Send the fam much love, and I want to kind of end this year by also saying thank you to all the listeners. It's been awesome growing from 0 subscribers to a couple of healthy dozen subscribers, and it's been really fun, man. It's been a good little experiment in hanging out with you, a recorded medium.
Yeah, totally. Thanks to everyone for staying true, sticking with it. This has definitely been a different experience for me in the past year. Had no idea what it would be like to start a podcast. I've been having an absolute ball with you. And honestly, man, these are the highlights of my week. I gotta say, I'm so jazzed to start every week because it means that we get to do this for
Same here,
what's going
dude.
on like 7 hours today. So
It's true, dude. Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks to you, thanks to the
much love to
listeners,
everyone.
and yeah, man, have a
And I'll see
safe
you-
Christmas and holiday season, and I'll see you in the new year.
All right, buddy.
Bye,
Talk to
buddy.
you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.
Later.